All right, well, here we are once again with Paul Lesko, the hobby lawyer on the channel, here to break down what is happening with the legal side of the hobby right now. Paul, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
No, thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, the last time I had you on was to talk about some other lawsuits going on with CGC. Now we're hopping over to the other grading company. Every time you're going to hop on this channel from here on out, for forever, it's going to be, anytime there's something kind of crazy going on in the world of comic book collecting. But let's kind of dig into this sort of case. I think yesterday it was when sort of the news started to break, and this is one of the first times that you posted it on your Twitter. I made a video talking about it, from my perspective of going through sort of the case filing. I'm sure people watching are somewhat familiar with, the case at this point, but could you just, for those who are tuning in for the first time, maybe just give a little bit of a rundown of what is going on here with Beckett and Mark Wilson and West Stephan, and especially from your perspective as being kind of, the lawyer here.
Sure. So what you have is it looks like a simple case of employees have left, gone to a competitor, and there's now a lawsuit filed by the former employer saying that there was a breach of the non-disclosure agreement, breach of contract, theft of trade secrets. It sounds a lot easier than it is, but that's what we have pled there so far. So what happened is Beckett has started to branch off into, it's been in the comic book area for comic book grading. And they mentioned in this complaint that they're looking forward to actually adding subgrades into comic book grading. It's something that's unique to Beckett. Beckett actually has, when it comes to trading cards, they have subgrades. So you don't just get a number 10 or number 9. You'll also get scores for centering, corners, surface, sides. So you get additional grades there. So you get additional information. So Beckett has been wanting to bring that over into the world of comic books. So jump forward to this lawsuit here where it says that the two defendants were employees at Beckett, and Beckett found out that after one of the employees left, they were watching on the YouTubes, and they saw a posting by PSA saying that their former employee was now the head of the PSA section that was working on getting into comic book grading themselves. So at that point, Beckett started to do an investigation. And they say that they found that prior to that defendant's leaving, he was sending emails to himself with alleged trade secrets, including how subgrades were going to be implemented by Beckett. They haven't done it yet. They want to do it in the future. It's a trade secret, and they don't want other people to know about it. Right. Continuing in their investigations, it looks like the other defendant, who is now a former employee, although he was an employee until this lawsuit was filed, but they were looking and said that he was also sending emails to himself of additional trade secrets, some of which included the subgrading and how that would work in comic books. And he apparently, I guess, was going to be on his way to potentially working over at PSA also. So that's what we know right now from the complaint. Now, actually, Beckett was so worried about this, they filed for a temporary restraining order, meaning they want the judge to stop the former employees from actually disclosing any of Beckett's trade secrets. So the judge granted that pretty quickly. Normally with a TRO, they're granted pretty quickly if you show that there's sufficient evidence for a TRO. So there's actually an injunction out there preventing either of these former employees from using Beckett trade secrets or disclosing them to anybody. We'll have another hearing Friday, where the judge will hopefully have the employees actually in the court also, so they can get their side, and then he will decide if the injunction will stay longer than that. So the way you think about it, a temporary restraining order is very small. It's very temporary. It's a week long here, so that everybody can get a hand on get a grasp of what's going on here. And then once everybody's in court, the judge will decide, is this going to last longer? Could it last for the entire case, or could it last for a shorter time, or could they cancel it altogether? So it should be an interesting hearing Friday.
Very interesting. And so it'd be important to note for the people watching that West Stephan was, as I understood it in the details that came out today, is that he was currently an employee at CBCS, and upon this servicing of this lawsuit, he was terminated from the
Yeah,
company. So
the complaint is rather brutal about that. It says, it starts off by saying he's an employee here, and it says, well, until this lawsuit's filed, he was an employee. We, contemporaneously let him go.
yeah, very interesting. So upon this kind of injunction, so I'm clear, would it be the case that, Mark Wilson, who is currently the head grader at PSA, like, is he somebody who woke up, say yesterday morning and then got this lawsuit and was like, oh, I guess I'm not allowed to go to work today? That's how that works?
And it really does, because the injunction was a little bit broader than simply saying don't use our trade secrets. It actually had some language in there saying that we don't want these people, working for a competitor and in this exact area, in the comic book grading area. So yeah, it's like he got I don't know if it's a free vacation, but right. He's on vacation, and it's important that he abide by that because it's a court order, it's an injunction. If he violates it, he can be found in contempt of court. And the judge, when you're in contempt, has a lot of things that he can do, he or she can do, including potentially throw you in jail. So I know you wanted to run through some like scenarios of what would I do if I would be people's lawyers. But if I was, his lawyer, and he woke up and called me and said, hey, I got this injunction against me, I'd be like, don't go to work. Don't even think about going to work, because if you even if you have the appearance of impropriety, it could backfire on you. You could, either be fined or end up in jail.
Yeah. So definitely, very, very serious case that was filed. I think the damages were in the tune of $1 million. That was at least on the court case.
At least $1 million.
At least $1 million. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Now, so it's interesting. So now that we have kind of like the case out there and the details, I am sort of, since we have adults in the room, which is not me, I do want to kind of put a little more of my tinfoil hat and kind of ask you some of the interesting questions here. So I'm curious, just in general, going to this sort of NDA and this breach, how is this actually, one, kind of provable that, that they're actually giving these things to PSA, as opposed to like, well, I just, I sent this to myself, whatever. And then two, like, is this really a problem? And let me kind of just do a little bit of a scenario. Like, doesn't this happen kind of all the time in various different industries? Let's like give an analogy to our sports card collectors out there that are familiar with, sports teams. Let's say that you're somebody who's like the offensive coordinator of a certain football team, and you have the playbook and all sort of the organizational trade secrets and that sort of thing. And then, in the offseason, you get the head coaching job at some other rival organization. Aren't you also going to like email yourself the playbook and take all those little things and bring it over to your new job? Like, doesn't that just sort of come with a territory here? So I guess maybe you can kind of talk about that and like, what do these NDAs or non-competes really mean?
Sure. And there's a distinction between an NDA and a non-compete. The NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, and a non-compete means I won't go to work for competitors. These two employees only had NDAs. They did not have a non-compete. And it's kind of funny because Beckett is trying to expand this non-disclosure agreement into a non-compete agreement. So to tackle the questions, it's becoming more and more common to have litigation over non-compete agreements. Now, or non-disclosure agreements. So properly drafted non-disclosure agreements should really only focus on trade secrets or proprietary information that's known only to the company itself and not known beyond there. And also those trade secrets have to be properly taken care of. They have to be marked as trade secrets. They have to be locked up or somehow kept away from just anybody that's out there. If you can't leave them at Starbucks when you're there. You can't just have them just open in a room and let anybody walk in. They actually have to be treated as trade secrets. So you're looking at the important stuff. So, when it comes to like the playbook, I would say this is more analogous to maybe, it's the source code for Google search. That's really what you're looking at when it comes to trade secrets.
Right.
And that's kind of the story that Beckett was putting together with the subgrades, saying, hey, subgrades for trading cards, they're hard. It involves not just, scoring everything, but then there's an algorithm that actually puts together the final score. It's not just add all four of these together and you get the exact number. There's actually a complex algorithm. So we were actually in the process of putting together that algorithm for comic books, because comic books are different than trading cards. There's more nuances in there that we have to deal with. So we're still in that developing process. And also, no other, real trading card authenticator or grader uses subgrades. So it shows that it's a trade secret. We know how to do it. We do it well. Nobody else is even trying to do it. If we can figure out how to do it for comic books, we'll be very successful there too. So that's why we keep it under lock and key, and we keep it as a secret. So that's it. So if you look at it, it's like the most important things in the entire world. That's what should be covered by an NDA. Now, companies normally are they don't like even any of their emails, no matter what. Even if it's like, hey, go pick up some donuts for the meeting today. They don't even like anything out there. So some companies will try to expand an NDA to covering things it's not supposed to. But when it's fine-tuned and only focusing on trade secrets or proprietary information that's not available to competitors and could hurt the other company, then I think that's more the proper way to look at an NDA.
Got it. And so do you think that the real issue here is the fact that, he sent the emails to himself? So for instance, with the Google search algorithm kind of analogy, if I'm a Google engineer and I understand, yes, I can't say share, the algorithm with, Microsoft when I work for them, but like, it's still in my mind. Like I'm still the engineer, right? So I'm still somewhat allowed to kind of bring this information next time I have a team meeting, right?
Not really. No, the way an NDA is written is, it is hard. You're correct. It is hard to unring that bell. Once you know something, it's pretty hard to forget it or not use it. But here, when you're talking about, with no one's going to have Google source code memorized. So that's, how you keep it as a trade secret. Here, the algorithms are supposed to be fairly complicated also. So as you could probably see by the emails that were being sent, if it was something that they could just memorize, well, then, why have a paper trail? Just have it memorized, and then nobody will be none the wiser for it. But the fact that there were emails that were sent, multiple emails with multiple documents discussing subgrades, it shows that it's probably a fairly complicated process where they are, and it would, if you can imagine, if PSA was going to use that, or if these employees were going to bring it over with them to PSA, they would have a head start that they shouldn't have, but for Beckett's work.
Right. Well, let me kind of jump ahead here and actually kind of show here on your Twitter thread, as well as the case filing, these were some of those emails that were shared within, the case file. And you guys can see right there the kind of the timestamps, the dates, and the titles of the email being spine split lengths and grades, subgrades discuss, guidelines for subgrades, common grader noted. This one I thought was interesting, CGC witness signature policy. Does that mean that CBCS has some CGC trade secrets? I mean, what are we talking about with that email right there? Yeah. So I guess, in this, again, I kind of am curious, like, it's one thing, okay, we see these emails, he's sending it to himself, but like, how does one go from, okay, he's sharing this information, he's going to PSA, but then make that connection that it is in fact being shared with PSA? Because it's still plausible that it just has this information for his own sort of database. And you even mentioned in the Twitter thread how it's implied that PSA has it, but they don't name PSA in the lawsuit. And I thought that was kind of an interesting detail.
Yeah, and it might be that that's where Beckett is being a little bit cautious, because I after reading this, one of the things that stuck in my head is, why aren't they suing PSA yet? There's a comparable lawsuit that's ongoing right now between Upper Deck, Ravensburger, and Ryan Miller, where Upper Deck had retained Ryan Miller to help them develop a new TCG. And Miller ended up leaving, went to Ravensburger, and created Lorcana. And Upper Deck alleged that Ryan Miller took the instructions and all the trade secrets that were going into their TCG, brought it over and made Lorcana. So that's when Upper Deck brought a lawsuit against not only Miller, but then also the company that was implementing it, Lorcana, or Ravensburger. So here, maybe what's happening is Beckett just found out that these emails were being sent from the employee to his personal account. And, since they are missing that next step, they're saying, well, we need the injunction here because he has our information. He was not supposed to leave with this information. This information was supposed to stay at Beckett. So because of that, we're going to limit the lawsuit to this. However, during this lawsuit, we are going to depose him. We're going to ask for all of his documents and all of his emails. And if he says that, yes, I sent this to, I used this when I was at PSA and creating anything, well, then I think it's not hard to imagine that then there will be an additional lawsuit against PSA saying you can't use any of that information, delete it, get rid of everything that you have. And, basically, get rid of if you have a subgrade program, get rid of your subgrade program.
Do you think that the case gets more complicated with West Stephan because he was currently a CBCS employee and he's not technically at PSA yet, or we don't know that? So then his case kind of gets a little muddy, right? Because then it's like, well, he's not working for PSA, so he's not necessarily giving them the secrets.
Yeah, no, and I think the implication is heavy. I mean, I'd have to look at it again that, he is going to be a PSA employee or was talking to PSA about being an employee there. So in that instance, you could probably, look at Beckett's actions as preemptive to say, hey, look, why is he sending this to his personal account? I mean, he's probably got his own work laptop. He can bring it wherever he wants. He can always look at it. If you're sending it to your personal account, it doesn't look good. There's probably something, we think there's something bad going on there.
Right. Now, in the Twitter thread, which, again, I'll put a link in the description so you guys can go check out Paul and everything he had been adding commentary to, a lot of the posts here. It talked about how, or you had mentioned that CBCS is trying to turn this NDA into a non-compete. Do they have grounds to do that? Isn't that something that's like, hey, you can't hand wave this over to, you can't change the rules all of a sudden. Do you think that there's precedent for that?
I think no. I don't think there is precedent for it. I think when you file a lawsuit, you're going to ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars, but then you'll be happy with, just the moon. And that's probably what's happening here. They'll make that argument, and I guarantee at some point we'll see in a writing, you can't unring the bell, saying it's commonly used in this type of litigation that once you're exposed to a trade secret, you can't be expected to forget it. We don't have delete buttons. It's there. So that person has a advantage and potentially could be using our trade secrets. So you can see them trying to stretch the NDA into a non-compete. But I think here it's easy to segregate it. So long as Beckett or so long as PSA doesn't release a subgrade program, and since subgrades are the only trade secrets that are alleged here, then you can't block him from being an employee. Now, if he was brought over to start a subgrade program and that's all they had going on there, well, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for the former employees to show that they're totally innocent here because you've got a head start. You're doing exactly this, delete it all. And now do they even want you over there?
Yeah, it seems really difficult to kind of, put forward a non-compete in a really niche sort of industry. Like they're saying that, Mark Wilson doesn't have the right to work at CBCS, but, as somebody who spent his entire career within kind of the grading space, like what else is he to do but to jump to like the other league, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's when the company comes back and they make the stupidest arguments that are so annoying all the time. They're like, oh, but look, we paid them X hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to do that. So they signed this contract knowing they were going to get all this money. So because of that, they knew the deal that was going to be there. So they need to not ever talk about this again, even if it means they don't get a job in this field for the next 2 years. So,
right.
There's always those arguments. I don't think they're very powerful. I think a juror hears that and it's just like, just a company trying to overreach, but they'll make it.
Yeah. Well, let's do, the role play here. And let's say that you were either Mark Wilson or West Stephan's representative. How would you be kind of counseling them through this process right now?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, right now, I'd be telling them, it's the injunction says we don't know what the exact injunction says, but we know what Beckett asked for. So I'm assuming that since nobody was on the other side, Beckett got its entire injunction. And since part of the injunction was you can't work for a competing comic book grading company, don't go to work today. Don't get on don't talk to anybody at work, maybe send them an email saying, hey, there's this lawsuit. I've been enjoined. I can't work, but don't take any calls. Don't do anything. Spend some time with your spouse, take the kids to the park and do something else. But also don't delete anything. There's always that fear that, oh no, I've been caught. People try to, sometimes do bad things. don't delete anything. The easiest way to lose lawsuits nowadays is to delete evidence or lose evidence. If that happens, the other side's going to say, hey, if they deleted it or got rid of it, it must have been bad for them. So, Your Honor, give us an implication of wrongdoing here. So, really at this point, it's don't go to work, collect, keep all the evidence, keep everything safe, and sit down and let's figure out what's the real story, if there is a real story. Now, normally with every filing, I mean, you have $1,000 an hour attorneys, working on every filing. If you read it and you don't think that they're going to win, those attorneys wasted their time. Every filing you read by an attorney should be like, wow, these guys are the other guys are screwed. They really are. So, but normally when it comes to the lawsuits, the truth is somewhere in the middle. So we'll see what the other sides, what the former employees' positions are, and then I think we can more accurately, determine who's going to win or who's going to lose in this instance. But right now, yes, from this filing, it looks like Beckett has the upper hand.
And so, but then as far as like the emails and then that next connection to PSA, like, do you think it's just sort of, if you were Mark Wilson or Wes, you're just sort of saying like, oh, just nostalgia. I just wanted to keep this information because it reminds me of the time I worked at CBCS.
Yeah.
And that's really it.
It's, does that pass the jury sniff test? Why are you sending all these work documents to you, other than you're going to use them in the future? And that's Beckett's concern. While it might be PSA who's getting this information, it's the fact that they have our property. These are our trade secrets. Our trade secrets should not be outside of our server system or whatever the protections are. So since the documents are outside of our server system, they'll eventually say we need them all or they need to be deleted because it's our trade secret. Once the cat's out of the bag on a trade secret, it's worthless. So, that's really where they're going with that.
Yeah. And you had a humorous post of, CBCS with the office, destroying, computers in the parking lot. As far as where PSA is, now if you're going to put on your PSA representation hat here, where do you think that they should stand on this? And from an optics perspective, it sort of looks like, okay, did they poach this, team of employees and now they're kind of going to adopt these sort of CBCS techniques? What would you be saying, internally if you were them?
Sure. So right now they're probably on what's called, evidence collection to try and figure out what is the story. And they're probably trying to determine, did PSA approach these guys and say, hey, come on over here. We know you have trade secrets. It's fine. We'll never get caught. Was it something nefarious like that? Or was it simply, hey, these guys have worked for Beckett for a while. They can help us, starting where we are here. Let's hire them. And then, they didn't know there was trade secrets there. I think they need to figure out what their positions are. If they do find out that they knew somehow that these were trade secrets, potential trade secrets that were being brought over here or Beckett proprietary information, then their fallback is going to be, these aren't trade secrets. Everybody knows this. This is just common sense. Nothing here is trade secret protectable, or maybe it's a trade secret, but you didn't keep it like it was a trade secret. Look, you got employees sending them to their personal emails. What type of protections did you have on these trade secrets? So there's varying things that they can do. They're not going to, no matter what, they're not going to roll over. But it'll be interesting to see, are they going to be aligned with the defendants here and say, hey, everybody's innocent? Or are they going to say, oh, whoa, we didn't know any of this? I always find that's interesting in these former employee, new employer lawsuits that are out there. Is, are they going to link arms and say we're a unified front, we didn't do anything wrong, or are they going to be like, no, we didn't know, this is bad, we're going to throw you guys to the wolves and we'll be fine? Yeah,
it's kind of a sort of a catch-22, I suppose, in that one, because if you kind of wash your hands of it, then all of a sudden it's sort of an admission of guilt right away. At least in terms of how it's perceived. As far as CBCS, do you think that they had, I'm not going to say the right to do it. Of course, they certainly had the right to do it, but do you think that this was the right move for them? I mean, there's been a lot of conversation in the comic book world about PSA opening up their comic book division. Even the people at CGC, I'm sure, have taken notice, and it's big news, and people are really anticipating, what this is going to mean in 2025. Do you think that CBCS kind of said, "Hey, man, we gotta nip this in the butt"? I mean, this is like we're already kind of struggling here to be number two, and we're trying to gain some ground to maybe get some more market share, and we have this other player coming in. Do you think that this was the right move for them?
Yeah, I definitely think it was. I mean, it's, first of all, protection of trade secrets, a lot. I mean, yeah, whatever, protecting that. But if you could potentially hamstring a new competitor that's out there, you gotta try it, especially when you have a legal basis for it. So yes, you definitely need to protect your trade secrets, but also if it, makes your competitor jump back and not be as good as he's supposed to, it's probably a good lawsuit to have filed.
Gotcha. I guess in your experience, you mentioned there's been many other sort of NDA cases, that have happened in not only like the collectible world, but in also other industries. Just from where you see it right now, how does this type of stuff usually end up?
Well, normally at some point you'll get a confidential settlement where you don't know what's going to happen. But there really has been a trend that you can see where courts tend to side more with the former employers. So
really?
They have an NDA, especially if you have these, potential actions that could be interpreted as bad. The employers, because, most courts, I don't know if they try to, but they tend to side with corporations anyway. So you have a corporation, they're doing good stuff, they're selling stuff, they have their trade secrets. They've done everything to protect those trade secrets. They've even told their employees, these are trade secrets, you can't leave with them. And then you have the former employee sending himself emails of this stuff and, making sure that the trade secrets are going with him and leaving the property. In instances like that, judges really do tend to side. I mean, it's how you can see with injunctions being entered or even consented to by the defendants. And that's one thing. And, with like I'm trying to remember, it's the Terraza case, the CGC versus Terraza case. I'm pretty sure in that case, they were former employees who left and they were accused of wrongdoing. They agreed to a temporary injunction. And that's one of the ways that you try and build up credibility with the court to say, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. They didn't need to run to the court and get a temporary restraining order. We would have agreed to do this because we weren't going to do anything with these anyway. And that's where you get I just did this for nostalgia. That was a project I worked on. I just wanted to hang it on my refrigerator. Now I realize it was wrong. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, speaking of the Terraza's case, I think that there is a little bit of an update. While I have you here on the channel, it's been a while since we've talked about those CGC things, but I figured maybe the people are curious to hear your perspective or how some of that stuff, has shaken out over this course of this last year. The first one, the Reholder one, whose name I'm blanking on at the moment, Zanello, thank you. Yes. Zanello case was settled out of court. And so that one kind of has a bow on it, so to speak. But the Terraza's one, like you mentioned, the employees that were, swapping books within the building. What's going on with them?
Sure. So with and just to put a bow on the Zanello case, it's settled. And in the settlement, the defendants agreed to an injunction. And the injunction is pretty broad to the point that they can't even sell CGC graded comics anymore. It's a pretty broad injunction that they agreed to. Similarly, with the Terraza's case, that's the former employee case. It looked like this case was on the way to settling with a pretty all-encompassing injunction there as well. But the settlement kept getting pushed out and pushed out. They kept telling the judge, hey, we need more time to work on the settlement. So the judge said, look, this has been going on for too long. By September 13th, I need to know this case is completely settled, or else you defendants need to start participating in this case. You need to answer the complaint and you need to go from there. So September 13th was just last Friday. I checked out the docket just now. There was no documents of settlement filed. There was also no response by the Terrazas to the complaint that was filed. So that seems to say to me that since the deadline is come and gone, the judge might do something in this case, dismiss it, say that the defendants have not completed what they're supposed to do, hold against them. It'll be very interesting to see. Now, maybe something was filed and it just hasn't shown up in the docket. That's a chance, but it looks like here that deadline was passed. And I mean, the docket was pretty explicit. It said no more extensions of time will be given. And when a judge says that, they mean that. So we'll see what happens this week or the next week once a judge realizes this deadline has passed, and maybe there'll be a bow on this case, but not the bow everyone was expecting.
Right. Well, I'm sure it'll be interesting if something does fall out from that. I will definitely have to bring you back on the channel to talk about it when it does. But Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to sort of explain this current case going on with Beckett, Wilson, and Stephan. We'll have to see how it all plays out. But in the meantime, if people want to kind of keep up with the things that you've been covering or what you got going on, or if people are curious about updates as soon as they come, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Paul_Lesko. Every morning I check out all the filings that happened the day before. And before I start working, I go through them and put them all up there. So Friday, I'll be hovering, looking at the dockets to see what's happened there. And maybe there'll be an update Friday. Maybe it'll be Monday. But I try to cover everything. All
right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for all the things that you do for the hobby. And we'll catch you on the next show.
Great. Thanks for having me.